Alhamdulillahi Rabbil Alameen, wa salatu wa salamu ala ashrafil anbiya'i wal mursaleen wa ala alihi wa sahbihi ajma'in. Thumma amma ba'd, fa'a'udhu billahi minash shaitanir rajim. Bismillahir rahmanir rahim. أم كنتم شهداء إذ حضر يعقوب الموت إذ قال لبنيه ما تعبدون من بعدي قالوا نعبد إلهك وإله آبائك إبراهيم وإسماعيل وإسحاق إلها واحدا ونحن له مسلمون تلك أمة قد خلت لها ما كسبت ولكم ما كسبتم ولا تسألون عما كانوا يعملون رب اشرح لي صدري ويسر لي أمري واحلل عقدة من لساني يفقهوا قولي آمين يا رب العالمين. ثم أما بعد, I'd like to first of all start by apologizing for my lateness. The honest truth, I overslept. I came from a very long intensive program that I just finished this afternoon, got home, told the family, hey, I got a program at 4:30, which was actually at 4, and I thought it was 4:30, passed out, and in doing so, I was in a coma. So, but alhamdulillah, I'm here now. So inshallah, what I wanted to do is, first of all, divide this conversation with all of you into two brief parts. It's not a long lecture that I want to give you. MashaAllah, you've learned a lot of things about fatherhood and the Islamic perspective of it based on the Quran and the Sunnah today. So I just want to add just maybe a couple of things that have already been said, maybe not. One of the things that I wanted to add is something from Surah Al-Kahf. In Surah Al-Kahf, Allah Azza wa Jal mentions towards the end of the surah the journeys of Musa alayhi salam, and one of those journeys is in regards to two orphan boys for whom he built a wall. As a matter of fact, the only thing mentioned first was the wall that he put together for them. يُرِيدُ أَنْ يَنْقَضَّ فَأَقَامَ, that the wall that looked like it wanted to tip over, but he set it straight, right? And when he did that, and eventually when his companion, his teacher, finally decided to tell him what the wisdom of Allah was behind each of those things that he did, like the repairing of the ship and the wall, and the child that was killed, etc. Specifically about the wall, what he said was, كَانَ لِغُلَامَيْنِ يَتِيمَيْنِ فِي الْمَدِينَةِ. This wall was for the purpose, for the benefit of two young orphan boys that lived in the city. And so the only thing we know, the only adjective to the boys is that they're orphans. Now it's strange that I'm telling you that, because here we're supposed to talk about awesome dads, and I'm talking about two kids who apparently don't have a dad in their life, who don't have a mom or dad in their life. But interestingly enough, Allah immediately follows that up with وَكَانَ أَبُوهُمَا صَالِحًا. Their father was a good man. Their father was a good man. Now this is really remarkable, that these are two young boys who actually are missing the role of a parent in their life, and yet the good that is coming to them is actually coming to them. One of the rationales Allah is offering is that the good that they're getting in their life is because of someone who's not even alive anymore. And that actually Allah had a messenger, one of the Ulul Azm messengers, travel across the oceans to help build a wall at the service of two young boys only, and one of the reasons, they had a great dad. He was a good man. That's it. So, and by the way, him being great, actually, it seems, doesn't even have to do with how he raised them, because he wasn't even alive to raise them. What makes him a great dad in the surah, in the Quran, is just his own self. Perhaps his concern, his Islam, his good deeds. That's it. In other words, the first point that I want to bring to your attention is that this person, we don't know his name. We don't know this person's name. We don't know where he lived. We don't know when he died. We don't know what he did. We know nothing. All we know is kana salihan. That's all we know. The father of these two boys was a good man. That's it. That's all we know. And sulh is also important here, because to be salih, like Hamiduddin Farahi rahimahullah commented, that salih actually has to do with you constantly fixing something that keeps going bad. Like a plant that if you don't water it goes bad? You're doing sulh of it every time you water it, every time you fix the soil, etc. You're fixing it up. You do sulh of your house when you clean it up. Somebody does sulh, in Texas we do sulh of the foundations of our homes because they crack and go bad, right? The plumbing needs sulh sometimes. So in other words, by definition in human beings, there are things that deteriorate, things that start falling apart. None of us are perfect. None of us do good deeds that fix something forever. things start deteriorating again, and you have to fix them again. Then they start deteriorating again, and you fix them again. And this is actually the idea behind sulh. And what's really beautiful about that is, here's a wall, physically the image of a wall that's deteriorating and it's being fixed. And this is in honoring memory of a man who constantly recognized what is wrong in his life, what are things he could fix about himself, and what are things he could fix around him. What is wrong around him, and he could help fix it. That's actually at the end of the day what this deen is. You know, this is why Allah says وَعَمِلُوا الصَّالِحَاتِ so many times in the Quran, or يَعْمَلُونَ الصَّالِحَاتِ. The adjective salih is beautiful, because the entire idea behind it, Allah doesn't even give it a mawsuf, like al-a'mal al-salihat. Very few times, like وَعَمِلَ عَمَلًا صَالِحًا. Amal is not even mentioned. Allah goes straight to the salihat, because He wants our attention on this idea. That it's not just actions, and it's not just actions that are good, but it's actions that are fixing something that if you don't take care of, it will go bad. Right? Now, which comes back to the larger point. We're talking about parenting because if we don't take care of our responsibilities as parents, our worst nightmare is our children will go bad. That's the idea. We're trying to do the sulh and the islah of our children. Now, I wanted to start from this point because all of us, like one of my dear friends puts it, all of us are on borrowed time. Like none of us are here and we know when we're going to leave this earth. This is a good father, and his adjective is a father, but he may never have even lived to see his children grow old enough that they can speak and call his name. Maybe he died long before then, you know. And yet, his adjective is abuhuma, because of course he's their father. But the thing that I wanted to highlight here is, when we concern ourselves with the future of our children, in this ayah what we're learning is, actually you and I being concerned about us, ourselves being salih, is the first insurance policy for our kids. That's the first insurance policy. And Allah will take care of your kids if you were good. If that is a part of Allah's plan, because it seems as though, you know, one of the ta'ammulat that stems from this ayah is that, you know, if somebody's pouring water on like a plant, but you know how water kind of splashes? So the plants around it kind of get some water too. Even though the intention was this plant, other things get wet also. It is as though the goodness of this man, Allah put so much rahmah on him that the rahmah sprinkled over to his kids also. You know, because the rationale isn't that they did something great. The rationale is their father was good. Right? So whether or not we're alive or not, us being good ourselves is at the heart of this problem. Us being the example ourselves is at the heart of this problem. And that is the greatest security we can have. We can actually safely say that when we leave this earth, Allah will take care. Now, Allah will take care of what? That's the other interesting thing. Allah will take care of the dunya of these kids, the rizq of these kids. But Allah actually did not mention the deen of these kids. Which is interesting, right? Because we want the best for our children in terms of their deen, and we want the best of them for this dunya. But you know, you have this idea that's iterated in the Quran on a number of times, a number of occasions. Like for example, in the ayat of inheritance in Surah An-Nisa, Allah mentions that, you know, khafu alayhim. Like if you should fear the situation if you were to leave your children behind and they were little and you died all of a sudden, then you'd be afraid what would come of them? What would happen to them? How would they survive? Right? That's the first concern Allah is alleviating you of. Don't think of yourself as the raziq of your children. Allah is the raziq of my children and your children. Yes, many of us drove here, and some of us, we brought our kids here too. You know, and we tucked them in their seat belts and all of that, but literally none of that is a guarantee. None of this is a guarantee of our safety or their safety. So if we do right by Allah, the bottom line of this first point, if we do right by Allah, then Allah will do right by our kids in this dunya. But that leaves the other matter behind, because that's only the one matter addressed in this story is the matter of their dunya, their rizq, their provision is taken care of. Okay, one problem solved. Obviously, what's the other problem? Their deen. Their deen, which is a much bigger problem. And here things get a lot scarier. Actually, the guarantees in Islam are of your rizq of this earth. Those guarantees are offered many, many times in the Quran and in the Sunnah of the Prophet ﷺ, as if to say what you will be given on this earth is not that big of a deal. That's guaranteed for you anyway. Your rizq is written. Your مَا نَقَصَ مَالٌ مِّن صَدَقَةٍ, when you give sadaqah, wealth doesn't go down, etc. That's actually not a big deal to Allah. Even in for example, the great battles of the Prophet ﷺ and the conflicts against Quraysh, even then when victories would come, Allah would describe them as وَأُخْرَى. وَأُخْرَى لَمْ تَقْدِرُوا عَلَيْهَا قَدْ أَحَاطَ اللَّهُ بِهَا وَأُخْرَى تُحِبُّونَهَا نَصْرٌ مِّنَ اللَّهِ وَفَتْحٌ قَرِيبٌ. As though the victories that will come in this earth are ukhra, they are secondary. It's not a big deal. It's not a big deal. So let's talk about taking care of the guidance of our children, which has actually been the crux of what you've been trying to talk about all day today. Is how do we pass down this legacy of Islam to our kids? The first realization here that's important for parents is that you and I, human beings, forget parents for a second, human beings will never be in control of another human being. That's the first reality that we have to internalize. No human being will ever be in control of another human being. We will be responsible for other human beings. We will have other human beings in our care. That's true. We can have them in our care. We can be answerable to some extent for other human beings. But actually, every single human being at the end of the day has to answer to Allah on their own. This reality, we have a relationship with our children and a loving relationship, but I can guarantee you the relationship Rasulullah had sallallahu alaihi wasallam with humanity, the way he thought about humanity is far more intense than the way you and I think about our kids. Like he thought of the love and the concern that he had for humanity at large almost killed him. This is mentioned on a number of occasions in the Quran. فَلَعَلَّكَ بَاخِعٌ نَفْسَكَ عَلَىٰ أَثَارِهِمْ. It's not just once, So when Allah mentions this over and over again, that you might just kill yourself in grief, what does Allah tell him in response? Actually, for among many ayat, He says, لَسْتَ عَلَيْهِمْ بِمُسَيْطِرٍ. You're not in charge of them. You're not in control. You have no saytara over them. You have no control over them. If that's a reality that no human being will be in control of no other human being, then we have to internalize this very difficult truth. And that is, at the end of the day, I am not in control of my sons or my daughters. I'm not. I am not. The one truly in control is Allah. And what does Allah tell the Messenger sallallahu alaihi wasallam? Okay, you're not in control. What's the best you can do? What is the best you can do? Fadhakkir, remind. We have to create an environment where certain values are reinforced in our children, in our families, and eventually, as much as we can train them how to swim, as much as we can train them how to sail, eventually they're going to be on their own in the middle of the ocean. Whether Allah decides to take us sooner or later is irrelevant. Maybe we'll be separated from our children because Allah decides some of our time has come before others. Maybe we'll be separated from our children because their rizq is elsewhere, because their education is elsewhere. One way or another, we are going to be separated from our children. As a matter of fact, if it's not a physical separation, it might even be an emotional separation. There's an emotional separation between ourselves and our children also. And as children become adults, they become more and more, independent. That happened to each and every one of us. We have an affinity and a love for our parents. We will take that to our graves. But a point came in your life where you made most of your decisions yourself. You thought about things for yourself, and you didn't actually consult your parents on every little thing. You still gave them respect, and you obeyed them when they asked you to. Did the best you could, but you started becoming your own person. It wasn't like when the kids are 4 or 5 or 6 or 7 or 8 or 9, and you decide what they're going to eat for lunch, and what socks they're going to wear, and what shoes they're going to wear, and whether they've brushed their teeth or not, or what time they need to go to sleep and stop watching TV. You can't control that stuff. A point will come where they're going to be living their own life, right? And at that point, for a lot of parents who don't internalize that they cannot control another human being, they have a really hard time dealing with that age. They have a really, really hard time because they're still trying to, they see their children as they did when they were holding them, changing their diapers, And so when they're losing that control, they panic. Like, I'm losing my kid, especially Pakistanis, they get really panicky. I'm losing my kid. Arabs, for the most part, are okay. Their kids are independent at the age of 3. You know, they see at the age of about 47, your parents start thinking, maybe I should let loose a little bit. But, you know, so, you know, they even control what your wife is going to eat, forget what you're going to eat or something, you know. But I digress. This second reality, what I wanted to share with you is the worst case scenario first. And we want to do the best for our children, but we want to understand certain truths, certain realities. And those realities include, for instance, the stories of incredible human beings that lived on this earth, the prophets and messengers, many of whom are recognized as fathers in the Quran, right? And here you have this strange contrast. We just heard about a father whose name we don't even know, yet every time we recite وَكَانَ أَبُوهُمَا صَالِحًا, his ranks in Jannah are raised, because his name has been made immortal in the word of Allah. His name is permanently honored in the word of Allah. This man made it into the Quran as a good father, without actually having fathered kids and raised them, without even having done that. On the other hand, you have people like Nuh alayhi salam, or Yaqub alayhi salam is one of my favorite examples, or even Ibrahim alayhi salam. We'll talk a little bit to you about Yaqub alayhi salam, that are, you know, they're actually highlighted as great fathers in the Quran, especially Yaqub alayhi salam. On many occasions when fatherhood is brought up, Yaqub alayhi salam is brought up. You know, his role as a father is much highlighted. Actually, interestingly, from the Hebrew origin of his word, which is tied to the Arabic origin of his word, Yaqub comes from Aqib, and in the Hebrew sense it actually means the one who looks ahead. Literally that is how we are introduced to Yaqub alayhi salam, you know, and when he interacted with his children, مَا تَعْبُدُونَ مِن بَعْدِي, what are you going to worship after I'm gone? He's thinking ahead. You know, so on the one hand, he told his children, and now please listen to this carefully, he told his children, and he told his children the same thing that Ibrahim told his kids in one ayah, وَوَصَّى بِهَا إِبْرَاهِيمُ بَنِيهِ وَيَعْقُوبُ. Ibrahim gave the advice to his children along with Yaqub. Now what's the relationship between Ibrahim and Yaqub before we read the rest of this ayah? Yeah, so Ibrahim alayhi salam is the grandfather of Yaqub. So now in one ayah, Allah has put grandfather and grandson, and who's been skipped? The son has been skipped in this ayah. So we're skipping a generation and we put two people together in this ayah. Allah has put them together, which is remarkable. What we're learning is what was passed down was advice. And it passed down so well, it passed down two generations. It started with Ibrahim alayhi salam, and it's passed down two generations. So one of the things that we are going to be able to pass down to our children is wasiyah. Okay, it's very possible that you can pass down wasiyah to your children, good, heartfelt advice, counsel to your kids. There's, you know, and we have to become a family of a lot of advice, a lot of sitting down and talking heart to heart with our kids in a way that reaches them. You know, when you're talking to your kids and you're driving in the car and they're in the back going, nah, and they're not really listening, that's something else. But when you take a kid and you sit them down and you have a chat with them, and even if it looks like they're not listening, I'm telling you, they come back 10, 15, 20 years later and say, I remember when you said that. It's stuck in my head. And we remember those moments with our fathers. We remember the few times they decided to give us some advice, you know, and said, not about our grades. When they gave us advice about school or about mathematics or about homework, we don't remember those. But if they ever sat us down and gave us advice about, it's crazy, if they gave us advice about sadaqah, you know, if they gave us advice about salat, if they gave us advice about being nice to mom or something, it sticks in your head, and you can visualize this the moment you were sitting there with them. Allah did that between father and children. He did that. So fathers especially have to play the role of, you know, a musi and a muwassi, someone who's giving heartfelt counsel, sitting kids down and giving them advice. You know, they value your advice. They treasure that advice. They see the world through your advice. Whether they ask for it or not, you need to be in the position of giving it. And by the way, when I say advice, please understand, advice does not mean you are such a loser, you're such a disappointment. Come here, let me slap you first, and then let me tell you something. This is not advice. And that's not wasiyah. That's not how wasiyah is given. Wasiyah is an act of love. It's an act of care. It's an act where you know, somebody feels like you can confide in me, I can confide in you. You know, who's going to talk to your kids about, you know, puberty? Your 13-year-old boy, 12-year-old boy is going to have some feelings. Who's going to talk to him? Who's going to walk him through this stuff? It's crazy. And when their hormones first kick in, they don't even control them. Like it's just, your body is just crazy. He's just sitting in class looking out the window, squirrel goes up a tree and something happens in his body. Like, he doesn't know who to talk to about it. It's embarrassing. And ladies can't talk to him about this stuff. Well, you know what? You got to do it. You got to do it. We have to talk to our boys about girls. Time will come where you're going to start thinking that girls are pretty. No, Dad, ew, girls, cooties. No, it's okay, you can tell me. It's okay. You're not bad for thinking, that's actually a good thing, you think girls are pretty. That's a good thing nowadays. But let me walk you through this, son. Let me just help you with this stuff. Because that age will come. First they're ew and disgusting, and all of a sudden they're ooh, that'll happen. But we need to help our kids through this stuff. That's wasiyah. That's can save this kid's life. This stuff can save this kid's life. And so Yaqub alayhi salam is passing down the same exact advice as his father. And what is that advice? Ya baniya inna Allah astafa lakum ad-deen. My children, no doubt about it, it is in fact Allah who chose the deen for you. What a brilliant, incredible truth that he gave to his children. You're not Muslim because I'm Muslim. And you're not Muslim because my father was Muslim. And you're not Muslim because my grandfather was Muslim. Forget, we say Muslim. He could have said, Prophet, you're Muslim because I'm a prophet. And my dad was a prophet. And my grandpa was a prophet. You're Muslim for that reason. He said, no, you're Muslim because Allah chose Islam for you. It's not passed down through genetics. It's not inherited. The only reason you're Muslim is Allah decided to give you this gift. And that's not because I gave you this. It's Allah who gave you this. And if Allah does not want you to have it, no matter what force on earth tries to put it in your heart, it will not come in your heart. And if Allah wants you to have it, no matter what you're surrounded, what darkness you're surrounded by, you will have it. Listen, Ibrahim alayhi salam, the first person mentioned here, does not come from a genealogy of prophets. As a matter of fact, he comes from a genealogy of mushrik culture, right? And so when Allah decided that Allah chose him for Islam and him to be a prophet, it had nothing to do with his inheritance. And the opposite is also true. Just because you're in a Muslim family doesn't mean Allah will give you Islam. It does not mean that. You are Muslim because Allah decided that. He's very clear about that. In other words, our children have to carry their own Islam, not the inherited Islam. As a matter of fact, when Allah talks about inherited Islam in the Quran, وَإِنَّ الَّذِينَ أُورِثُوا الْكِتَابَ مِنْ بَعْدِهِمْ لَفِي شَكٍّ مِّنْهُ مُرِيبٍ. They're in doubt about it. People who inherit Islam are not so sure about Islam itself. Because when you inherit something, then it had to do with the last generation. You inherit a car, you inherit a house, but when you grow up, you're like, I don't like this house, we should move to a new house. You inherit a car, it's an old car, man, I need to get a new car. You inherit old things that may not be relevant for your generation. If you think of Islam as an inheritance, then you're not going to be so sure if it's right for you. Because you're living in a different time. You'll have to come to Islam on your own terms, kids. It's all you. فَلَا تَمُوتُنَّ إِلَّا وَأَنْتُمْ مُسْلِمُونَ. Don't you dare die except you're in a state of submission to Allah. In other words, you're not answerable to me. Who are you answerable to? Allah. That is the greatest advice you can give to your kids and instill this value. Guys, kids, boys, girls, I love you, but you don't answer to me. As a matter of fact, you're answerable to Allah. You're just answerable to Allah. Who is the child of Yaqub alayhi salam? Who among the children of Yaqub alayhi salam? Who is it? Anybody know? Yusuf alayhi salam. And Yusuf alayhi salam carried Islam from the time he was kidnapped. From the time he was separated. So as a kid he carried Islam. You know what that means? Where did his Islam come from? His dad, who instilled in him that no matter where you are, even if the fatherly presence isn't there, you're going to hold on to your values. And by the way, that's not because of his father, but because Allah put barakah in the dua of his father, and because of the goodness of his father, and his own standing up for the truth, that Allah Azza wa Jal gave him that. But the opposite is also true. That's the scary part. The opposite is also true. Yusuf alayhi salam is not the only child of Yaqub. He has 11 other brothers. And they're not exactly people whose autograph we want most of Surah Yusuf. When we read about those people, they're the bad guys. But they're also children of a prophet, grandchildren of a a prophet, great-grandchildren of a prophet. Now coming back to Yaqub alayhi salam, he says, Allah says about him, well, أَمْ كُنْتُمْ شُهَدَاءَ إِذْ حَضَرَ يَعْقُوبَ الْمَوْتِ. Are you going to be, or were you witnesses to the time when death came or presented itself to Yaqub alayhi salam? So now Allah is telling us the final moments of Yaqub's life. What was the previous ayah? لَا تَمُوتُنَّ إِلَّا وَأَنْتُمْ مُسْلِمُونَ. Don't you dare die except Islam comes to you. This is what the dad is telling his kids, but he became a living example of that because now he's dying. He's dying. And his kids are going to outlast him. And at this moment of death, what does his Islam look like? Look, I've done what I could for the sake of Allah. Come here, kids, let me tell you something. Now when you're going and you're giving advice, what kind of advice you give? Take care of your mother, take care of each other, stay together. Don't be greedy, don't be frivolous, do this, do that, do the other. All this advice in your head. And because he has few moments left on this earth. That's all he's got. It's like this phone is going to get disconnected soon. That's all he's got. So what am I going to give them that can save their life? If they hold on to this one thing, it can save their life. I'm not so sure if they'll hold on to it or not, but at least I have to try to give them something that will save their life. He asks them this shocking question, مَا تَعْبُدُونَ مِن بَعْدِي. What are you going to be worshipping after I'm gone? مَا تَعْبُدُونَ مِن بَعْدِي. And it's remarkable that he used the word ma and not man. When you say مَا تَعْبُدُونَ, it means what are you going to worship? And the answer to what is an object. It's a what. What are you doing? Or what are you eating? It's a what. But when you say who are you meeting? Who are you with? Who are you talking to? The answer is a who. It's a person or it's an entity. He does not say who are you going to worship. He says what are you going to worship? What are you going to worship? Now, of course, if you're talking to someone and you expect them to know the answer and you know that they know, you'll say who are you going to worship? Of course, Allah. Right? It's like a rhetorical question. But he didn't put it in the form of a rhetorical question. He literally put it in the form of a query like, let's start from scratch. Let me just assume that I have taught you nothing from the beginning, much after I'm gone. And min ba'di also for tab'id, a long time after I'm gone, maybe the day after I'm gone, you're going to be making dua, salah, dhikr. You're going to remember where I used to sit and pray, and you're going to sit and pray there. You're going to remember I used to recite Tawrat, so you'll sit there and recite Tawrat or whatever it is, right? But much after I'm gone, what's going to happen? What happens to a lot of those things that our fathers used to do? If the father has passed away, the sons hold on to those things for a little while and then they wither away. Those habits and those memories start withering away. So he says, much after I'm gone, what are you going to do? And they said, قَالُوا نَعْبُدُ إِلَهَكَ وَإِلَهَ آبَائِكَ إِبْرَاهِيمَ وَإِسْمَاعِيلَ وَإِسْحَاقَ إِلَهًا وَاحِدًا وَنَحْنُ لَهُ مُسْلِمُونَ. We're going to be worshipping your ilah, your father's ilah, or the ilah of your fathers, your ancestors. And they mention all of those people. And then they say to him what he was hoping to hear from them, that we're not doing this for you. We're just answering your questions. Our relationship with Allah is independent of our relationship with you. You've given us this tarbiyah, but now we're answerable to Allah, and we realize that وَنَحْنُ لَهُ مُسْلِمُونَ. We are exclusively Muslim in submission to Him. Here I want to leave a little bit of advice. I know I have 4 minutes left. We, in our raising of children, I talked about this in a series that I did called Parenting and Quranic Wisdom. There are two things that we concern ourselves with. One of them is external and the other is internal. The external is behavior, the behavior of our children. And the internal are the attitudes of our children. Okay? Now, behaviors are visible. They're visible problems. Okay? But attitudes can be very secret. They can be internal. And you have no idea what your child's attitude is towards something, and it only comes out much later when they decide to let you know through some behavior. Right? So what we do most of the time in our parenting is we try to fix our children's behavior. That's what we focus our attention on, our children's behavior. And we try to control that behavior as best we can. Chalo, namaz padho. Right? Salah time. Make wudu, put the hijab on, do this on, do this, do that, do the other. Read Quran. And we try to curb that behavior. And we hope that by fixing a child's behavior, automatically their attitudes are going to get fixed. Like if they pray, they're going to become great people. Or if they memorize Quran, they're going to be awesome Muslims, etc., etc. That's actually entirely untrue. That's entirely untrue. Islam begins from the inside, like a seed. It's under the ground. It's on the inside, and then it manifests on the outside. Okay, so yes, we teach our children good behavior, but if you teach it at the expense of the right attitudes, the right motivations, the right intentions, and by the way, behavior, guess when you're going to see it? When you're looking over their shoulder. You're going to see behavior. And when the moment you look away, what's going to happen? You're not going to see it. But if you instill the right attitude, then you're going to find these kids making the right decisions on their own, independent decisions, for the sake of Allah, not for your sake. That's when you've passed Islam down. What does Islam mean? We submit to Allah. And if you're passing Islam down, then you're passing down a personality, you're instilling a personality that does things not for you, but does things for Allah. This kid does things because of Allah, you know? So kids aren't praying. It's good to remind them, but if you do enough reminder and do your tarbiyah right with these kids and teach them why is it that they're praying, why is that important, how does that help their life, you know, then you know what's going to happen? They're going to be able to stand for themselves. Last comment. I have 1 minute, so I can squeeze in one last comment. And that last comment is that this is simply an observation, and it's a bit of advice for myself and all of you, because I'm a father also, and you know, Sheikh Umar is a father, and all of us share these concerns. You know, I come from a generation of young Muslims from this country that when we were in college and we discovered religion and we decided to take Deen seriously, we were at odds with our parents many times. Like our parents didn't see the Islamic lifestyle that we decided to adopt as something, or they saw it as something extreme. Assalamu alaikum, 1 minute de dijiye. 1 minute de dijiye, inshallah. Shukriya. I've never done that before. Okay. It's never worked before either. Okay, but when we did, you know, I knew guys that when they got married, for example, they said, I want to have a simple nikah, right? And the family was in uproar. And there were weddings where parents were yelling at their friends, you corrupted my son, because of him we're having this humiliating wedding. And he's making us do this stupid thing, nikah in the masjid and all of this stuff. But they took those hits because they knew this is right. They took those hits, right? And they were willing to roll with the punches because they knew it's for Islam. I don't see that much anymore. I don't see that much. I don't see young people, for the sake of Islam, standing up to pressure. Right? It's pressure in the family and pressure in society. We got to raise those kids that can stand up themselves against pressure. Jazakumullahu khairan. Wassalamu alaikum wa rahmatullahi wa barakatuh.
Try it again.
No, I'm not going to try again. It'll work.
Jazakumullah khair to everyone for attending. Subhanakallah wa bihamdika ashhadu an la ilaha illa anta astaghfiruka wa atubu ilaik. Please, those of you that are here, make it to the ISI fundraiser, inshallah. It's important for the whole community to go and support. I'll be going there, inshallah ta'ala. Sheikh Yasir Qadi is there. So please make sure that you go there. And also, please do continue to support Umflix.